Philosophy. Philosophy is nothing other than the study of things that are invisible and that happened only once. Let us begin with the end in mind. If philosophy is indeed the study of things invisible and things that happened only once, then it is not a science in the modern sense, not a discipline of repeatable phenomena, not a method of codifying what is probable or of estimating what is next. It is rather the training of the mind and soul to recognize what does not appear twice and what cannot be seen at all. That is a rare and difficult education. The fragment before us is not simply a definition. It is a mirror held up to the task of consciousness itself. The phrase begins with the familiar philosophy is. We are invited to define, to anchor, to begin with clarity, but immediately we are thrown into mystery. Philosophy is not the study of what is, or of what recurs, or even what can be tested. It is the study of what is invisible, and not just invisible, but singular, unrepeatable. This is not just poetic, it is precise. 1. On the invisible, the first clause, the study of things that are invisible. We are already in strange waters. The invisible is not merely the unseen, it is the unseeable. For something to be invisible in the philosophical sense is not to be hidden behind a curtain or obscured by clouds or reduced in size beyond detection. It is to be constitutively beyond the reach of the eye. Love, for instance, justice, memory, meaning. These are invisible, and yet they structure the world more than steel or stone. There is no scanner that can identify loyalty. No spectrometer for betrayal, no microscope has ever revealed the will, but betrayals alter the courses of nations. Loyalty builds or destroys empires. Will moves the world. Philosophy begins here, not with atoms, but with absence. It seeks not what can be seen, but what must be understood in another way, through intuition, through reason, through that strange inward perception that is not of the eye or the ear but of the soul itself. The Greeks called it nous, the divine intellect. Plato spoke of the forms, invisible, eternal, non-material realities that give shape to the visible world. Modern minds scoff, preferring models that yield to instrument and experiment. But the invisible remains, and the philosopher, if honest, must return to it again and again, as Orpheus returned to the underworld, not because it was safe, but because it was necessary. To study the invisible is to wrestle with presence in the absence of evidence. This is the first half of our fragment, but the second is even stranger. 2. On what happened only once. And that happened only once. Here the fragment tightens the noose. Not only must the philosopher study what cannot be seen, he must study what cannot be repeated. In a world ruled by repetition, by routines, loops, and algorithms, this is heresy. The modern world is in love with the average, the median, the replicable. The scientist tests by recreating the same event under new conditions. The economist predicts by identifying trends across many similar cases. The psychiatrist diagnoses based on patterns observed in groups. But the philosopher, if this fragment is correct, must take a different road. He must study the thing that occurred once, and only once. The moment of birth, the moment of death. The moment the child said, I forgive you, or why didn't you protect me? The once-in-a-lifetime realization, the singular betrayal, the one decision that bent a life like a river redirected by a landslide. These are not trends, they are singularities. History itself is the record of things that happen once. Not always grand events, often small things, decisive things, irrevocable. And philosophy studies not just the fact that they occurred, but their meaning. What does it mean to fall in love once? What does it mean to lose a parent? Not in theory, but in the singular grief of that morning. Science asks, what happens when? Philosophy asks, what did that mean? And how do we live now that it has happened? The philosopher attends to what cannot be tested again. There will be no second trial run. The thing happened. It cannot unhappen. And yet its shape is unclear. It lives on, not in the body, not in the senses, but in the story, the question, the wound. To study what happened only once is to walk among ghosts, not to exercise them, but to listen. 3. The universal reach now. Let us widen the scope. If the fragment is true, and philosophy studies the invisible and the unrepeatable, then we may understand why philosophy is so often dismissed in the modern world. The world values what it can see and what it can scale. Philosophy deals in what it cannot see and cannot scale. What is invisible cannot be photographed. What happened only once cannot be monetized. And so philosophy is declared impractical, irrelevant, and yet, there it is, quietly informing every serious conversation about what matters. Ethics, meaning, mortality, love, beauty, regret, redemption. These are all philosophical questions, because they cannot be seen, and they happened only once. But the real genius of the fragment is that it doesn't try to justify philosophy on practical grounds. It doesn't say philosophy helps us live better lives, though it might, nor does it say philosophy makes us more critical thinkers, though it can. Instead, it simply describes what philosophy is, and in doing so, it sets it apart from every other discipline. It is the study of the invisible and of the singular. It is the science of the unseen and the record of what will never occur again. This is not weakness. It is power of a different sort. Fourth, a product of the Zero Friction Machine Company. Now let us turn. What kind of company would produce such a fragment? Only one. The Zero Friction Machine Company. This fragment is not merely a statement. It is a device, a tool for dislodging a certain conception of reality. For many, reality is what is visible and repeatable. The fragment slips in like a whisper and rewires the operating system. It says, no, reality is made of what you cannot see, and what cannot be done again. That is a dangerous idea. And so this fragment is not a definition, it is a wedge driven into the wall of the fortress called common sense. The Zero Friction Machine Company does not produce weapons in the ordinary sense, but it produces weapons of meaning, devices that erode illusion, tools that make it possible for a soul to see again. Sometimes for the first time, this fragment is such a tool. It dislodges the tyranny of the visible. It defies the cult of repetition, and it restores to philosophy its rightful domain, the invisible and the singular. The company built this fragment not to teach a course, but to strike a blow, to carve a portal, to offer, in fewer than 20 words, a reversal of metaphysical gravity, a recalibration of what matters. Fifth, closing. Let us say it again. Philosophy is nothing other than the study of things that are invisible, and that happened only once. Not a motto, not a slogan, a compass. It points to a territory that is always nearby and never found. It trains the eye to see what cannot be seen. It trains the memory to hold what happened only once. The fragment is small, but it holds a continent inside it. And that too is philosophy. This document has been generated for the Zero Friction Machine Company on the study of the invisible and the witness of the unrepeatable. Filed, reference, XFMC, intangibles, exhibit, philosophy, classification, singular view device,